Live in a constant state of fear and misery.
All right, so this past week on Twitter, I saw some interesting discussion being brought up around this article from Billy Bambro titled New Euro Central Bank Boss Christine Lagarde Made a Serious Bitcoin Warning. And you guys might remember Christine as the managing director of the IMF. She's been there since 2011, and we've brought her up many times on this show when discussing the IMF's position. Okay, so the article discusses Christine's nomination to the president of the European Central Bank and what implications that could have on Bitcoin and crypto. She will be replacing Mario Draghi, who didn't say much about the subject of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies other than to say they are highly risky assets. While Christine has been fairly open in her discussion about how blockchain, not Bitcoin, can solve a lot of the world's problems, the major difference between Mario and Christine is one's a PhD in economics and the other is a politician. Christine has discussed the IMF's special drawing right being rolled into its own crypto. And last we really dug into the IMF, it was a discussion on their blog post, Cashing In, How to Make Negative Interest Rates Work. In that post, the IMF discusses the possibility of creating a cashless society by making the risk of holding cash as costly as bank deposits. The proposal is for central banks to divide the monetary base into two separate local currencies, cash and electric money. E-money will be issued only electronically and would pay the policy rate of interest, and cash would have an exchange rate, the conversion rate, against e-money. So in theory, this would allow negative interest rates without throwing the system into shock. Christine told CNBC back in April of this year, quote, I think the role of the disruptors in anything that is using distributed ledger technology, whether you call it crypto, assets, currencies, or whatever, that is clearly shaking the system. We don't want to shake the system so much that we would lose the stability that is needed, close quote. This quote and others she's made in the past have some excited about her newly appointed position, saying it'll be a great move for Bitcoin in the crypto space. Senior market analyst at the brokerage eToro, Maddie Greenspan, said, quote, several people have pointed out to me already is that the next ECB boss is incredibly crypto friendly. Not Bitcoin, of course, but she has advocated already for state-backed cryptocurrencies as well as settlement tokens like XRP and JPM coin. We can expect that someone so crypto-friendly in such a position will be good for the industry as a whole, close quote. I think if you look at that narrow bandwidth of information and you are just in crypto, then you will most likely interpret that as a move, that is a positive move. However, if you're in Bitcoin and you understand the greater systemic risks to negative interest rates and the tyranny of this proposed fractional reserve cashless society, you might be thinking twice. The discussion was spurred on Twitter in our space from Ansel tweeting out this article saying, quote, the crackdown is closer than many of us realize. The quickly approaching financial crisis will give major governments the perfect excuse to aggressively regulate Bitcoin, close quote, which a lot of people took issue with saying regulate Bitcoin, but we understand he means regulate individuals' ability to use Bitcoin. And then another tweet by Raoul Pal laid out the blanket case of bank failures all across Europe with detailed charts and information to make the case. I highly suggest our viewers go through his tweet thread in the show notes, but here's two that help move our discussion along today. Quote, so the knock-on effects are all lining up to push one bank after another over the cliff of death, and there ain't a thing the ECB can do about it. As they have only one mandate, inflation. They have to cut rates. And this is why Christine Lagarde has been brought in. The ECB is going to need to become political. It is going to have to rescue an EU-wide banking system and put the banks into the state hands and buy the extra government debt, and they're going to need to force fiscal reforms and massive fiscal stimulus, close quote. So in summation, the ECB has moved out the PhD economist in favor of the politician to build the narrative and bend the will of the people to favor central banking. The regulation incoming could be as draconian as recent proposals we've seen in India, or it could be just enough to make their e-dollar competitive. Either way, I think this spells out. This doesn't spell out the best future for Europe. When Christine took over the IMF in 2011, the first order of business was Greece, and we saw what happened there. let's hope it's not our first order of business to do the same to Europe. So, considering the discussion we just had with Facebook and China and Libra and what's going on with the European Central Bank, what do you guys think about Christine moving over from the IMF to ECB?
So a couple of things there. Maybe the only thing I want to highlight is that Christine, he, she was crypto friendly, but this also means she somewhat understands the space. But I believe she actually understands the potential disruption that can come from Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. And the problem is that she has been elected to be the gatekeeper of this space. So, and she understands what's going on. So I don't know. It doesn't look good. Even if she's crypto friendly, her job is to not be crypto friendly, but to protect the euro. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think of her as crypto friendly at all, because if she's basically part of this group of people that are advocating for, making cash more difficult to use, and like, sorry, I'm a cash-based person just because I find it far easier and I like having privacy, and I like the fact that, if I go out to a store or a restaurant, I don't have to worry about whether my stupid plastic card will work or not because I have the money with me. Like, that's just the basic reality. That's why I use it. So anyone who is trying to take that, take my normal financial choice away from me is not my friend, and I don't think is a friend to cryptocurrencies either.
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys are right on target there. I mean, like the IMF that she served now for over 8 years. I mean, they've got close relations with the Bank of International Settlements, who runs the FATF. And I mean, like, we know that the Financial Action Task Force recent, guidelines that they handed down over the past couple of years now, like their stance really on this space. And yeah, I do not think that she is going to be friendly to the space at all. But for sure, this is something where it's just a bigger part of this, like, as far as this bigger play of, Singapore, China, what's going on with like different political parties in different countries. I mean, like, yeah, this is all about what they call stability risk. I mean, like, I was looking through it right before I jumped into the story. It's like India said they're skeptical, and South Korea said they're worried about stability risk. And a lot of this stuff has to do with, yeah, keeping that information flow and the people all together. And, if they have to, introduce like a Facebook Libra currency to kind of try and switch everybody over into their own sort of state controlled e-dollar or something, like, yeah, I think that's the move. I don't think that they're really friendly. I think they're just like maniacal. They're like, they know enough information to try and take over, like try and control the system, whatever part of the system they can control.
And before I let you go to Cuba, I just want to note that actually Christine is one of the more sensible people. I have been listening to her talks 2 or 3 years ago, and I think she's one of the more sensible people among all those central bankers, IMF people. So
She's a
it would be good
politician.
to.
I'm sorry, man. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I mean, like, she's a politician. She's supposed to, get you to think that.
Yeah,
Shinobi?
but most politicians don't get me to think that. She was even giving a talk back then that was so cryptic and man, I have to dig that up. It was interesting, but she's a very strange woman, not what you would expect. Don't say she's a politician. She's somewhat different, I think.
I mean, it's like they're just doing the inevitable. They're trying to undermine the economic incentives and actually compete with Bitcoin, and they can't. Like if they do all of the things you need to do to really fully compete with Bitcoin, you tear all of your own influence apart and wind up with a fraction of the power that you have right now. And it's just, I don't think they'll do it. And two, like the systemic shock that will cause is exactly what they're trying to avoid.
Yeah,